Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a great start to your August. The summer movie season is officially winding down, and we are now faced with the remaining blockbusters of the year. And one such blockbuster that I'm super pumped for is Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus. The trailers released so far have been great, showcasing a return to form for the franchise after the last few installments were getting a little bit too lost in the weeds. I'm a huge fan of Alvarez's Evil Dead film, so I trust him to bring the Xenomorph saga back to its roots. He's described the movie as a mix between Ridley Scott's first film and James Cameron's sequel, which has just filled me with so much excitement. And in the meantime, I've been revisiting all of the prior installments to get ready for Romulus. And if I'm being honest, the one movie that I was most interested in revisiting was Alien 3, which was kind of directed by David Fincher. We'll get to that. Now it's been well over 15 years since the last time I've watched this movie all the way through. My memory on it was kind of vague. As a wee lad, I remember feeling slightly underwhelmed after watching it, and in the following years, I've come to accept it as one of the internet's most hated sequels. The main problem being that fans were quite pissed off with the studio's decision to kill off Hicks and Newt following the conclusion of the previous movie Aliens. Which, hey, it's a pretty valid complaint. So Alien 3 has always existed in the back of my mind as the awkward stepchild of the franchise, one that even its own supposed director had disowned. And that guy made Benjamin Button. But I wanted to give this movie a fair shake, so I purposely avoided reading other people's reviews before watching it. I was treating Alien 3 as if it were a new film just released. I was going in fresh. And just for reference, I watched the 2-hour and 24-minute special edition, which was about a half hour longer than the theatrical version. I want to check out the assembly cut, but sadly I could not find it online since I have the technological prowess of a Luddite. Now if I'm being upfront with you guys, this will not be a complete bashing of Alien 3, nor will it be a clickbaity video meant to completely praise what was obviously a troubled production free of issues. This is just my attempt to analyze it as objectively as I can, both the good and the bad. Now starting off with the most egregious example of the bad, the main reason why audiences were so sour with this film is the direction it chose to take Newt and Hicks' characters. With the conclusion of the Aliens, we found Ripley and her surrogate family had narrowly escaped LV-426 with their lives. After battling the Queen and the entire Xenomorph hive, the trio rocketed off into space, away from harm and towards a better future. That's until we get to Alien 3, where both the Space Marine and the little girl are brutally murdered in the opening credits. And these were characters that had really struck a chord with the fans. After all the trials and tribulations endured by Ellen Ripley in both films, it gave a nice sense of closure to see her get some kind of happiness. And as someone who enjoyed Cameron's prior movie quite a bit, I completely understand that gigantic hurdle that filmgoers just could not get over. That is why I specifically watched Alien 3 on its own before watching Aliens. And I have to say, this decision does set the tone for the rest of the film quite perfectly, because this thing is bleak. This thing is mean-spirited. It wears the classic Fincher nihilism on its sleeve throughout, and the fact that a major studio allowed for this to be the follow-up to the action-heavy Aliens just astounds me. Like, objectively, it's a bold move, and I do kinda respect it for that, but it may have been a bit too heavy for people to go along with at the time. And there were even a few moments where it got a bit too heavy for me. The setting is a prison planet for supposedly reformed convicts, and the entire landscape looks like literal hell. Bishop, you remember Bishop? He's reactivated for 5 minutes and almost immediately begs for death. Ripley spends a decent amount of time in the movie trying to get people to kill her because of the alien inside of her. Yeah, this is not a happy-go-lucky sci-fi adventure. But then again, neither was the first film. Now don't get me wrong, and don't attack me in the comments. I'm not saying this is as good as Alien 1. The script for that first flick was way tighter than this one was, and there remains a large gap in quality between the two. But the first film was rooted in darkness, so technically speaking, it is keeping with that sort of atmosphere. And speaking of atmosphere, I have to say that the setting of Alien 3 remains my favorite part about it. The planet Fiorina, or Fury 161, is such a solid location for a space horror. The Foundry facility creates a constant feeling of claustrophobia. Now throw in a bloodthirsty creature, and you've got yourself the perfect place for some space killing. I've also been playing a lot of Dead Space lately, so just by watching this, my muscle memory had my fingers aching to start shooting some necromorphs. Now, the decision-making process that went into choosing this setting warrants an entire other video in and of itself. I'm not going to go too deep into the production for this one, but it's no secret that the long journey to make Alien 3 was an absolute nightmare. Scripts were written then promptly thrown out, with several ideas for proposed stories being considered. David Fincher himself was only brought on board when the previous director left after pre-production. And of course, all of those problems were still present when he was there, leading him to absolutely hate the entire experience. To this day, he has still completely disowned Alien 3. There was such a long period during the development process where the film was actually set to take place on Earth. And its first trailer teased that very idea with the tagline, "On Earth, everyone can hear you scream." Now that's where I, and a lot of people, would have preferred to see this film take place. And in the end, it did give us this prison location by choosing to change that, so I guess I'm okay with how it turned out, but it can go either way. Sigourney Weaver also had massive creative influence over the entire production, and it makes sense as she was nominated for an Oscar for her last outing as the character Ripley. She herself is personally anti-gun, and that led to the movie not having its characters use any guns. It may have resulted from the actress's political opinions, but it also helped to build the tension and stakes, as this crew is just as defenseless as the crew of the Nostromo was. Wait, those guys actually had flamethrowers. So this crew is even more defenseless! There's an entire undercurrent of religious allegories here too, and those aspects blend well with the alien. There's one sequence in particular where the eulogy for the dead characters coincides with the birth of the creature, and it was extremely effective. Almost as if hell is literally spawning this monster to prey upon these prisoners for their past sins. One such character is Clemens, played by Charles Dance. Good old Tywin Lannister, in a role that's not a villain. In a world full of harsh landscapes and brutal killers, he served as a nice moral center to give Ripley some emotional support. The romance between the two did feel rushed, but at a certain point, I was actually beginning to buy it. That is, until he's unceremoniously butchered by the alien halfway through. Because of course we can't have any shred of comfort here. This is Alien 3, baby! Get that hokey shit out of here! But my favorite performance of the film was by far Charles S. Dutton as Dylan. His character served as the religious leader of the prison, and a lot of his monologues are downright chilling, echoing the sentiment that the xenomorph is a demon sent straight from hell. Seeing his character go from hating Ripley to having a level of respect for her is probably the closest thing we get to a developed arc in this film. And this does lead to a big issue I have with Alien 3 overall, in that it ultimately feels kinda hollow when all is said and done. Darkness and atmosphere aside, the nihilism does begin to weigh heavily. If the movie didn't have other problems holding it back, maybe it would have felt more earned. I spent a decent portion of the middle act kinda checked out. The plot was really beginning to drag. Now things did begin to pick up a bit in the third act once the whole crew is on the same page trying to kill the alien, but at the same time there was way too many weird slapsticky moments where the characters were like bumping into each other and were laughing it off. Like, dudes, don't you know there's a xenomorph after you? It gave me mega Prometheus vibes, but I gotta say, the POV alien stuff was pretty sweet. When the camera takes us into the alien's vision and we see it chasing after the dudes, it just goes hard. And it's a massive upgrade from the CGI that was used earlier. Because holy fuck, that stuff did not age well. The design for the xenomorph is pretty cool, but I've always found it most effective when the creature is just lurking in the shadows. It's a large part of what made the first movie such a great horror flick. Seeing this thing just run around in all of its computer-animated glory just became comedic after a while. They should have used the POV effect for the alien from the very beginning of the film, though I have a pretty strong suspicion that this thing was being written by the day. I did think it was pretty cool to see the creature incubating in a species other than human. In the special edition I watched, it was a bison, but I'm pretty sure that it was a dog in the other ones. In any event, I love seeing the way its form changes depending on the animal it's in. I know it's a long shot, but I really hope we see more of that concept in Romulus. But I digress. I guess I'll spend the last part of this video by talking about the character of Ripley and her conclusion. Or, well, it was once her conclusion. Because believe it or not, there was a follow-up to this film. And that one was even worse. Probably because it had Ron Perlman in it. Alien 3 is all about apathy, and Ripley is meant to embody that. And I thought Sigourney Weaver played the part well. Again, Oscar nomination. And at this point in her life, all she has known is fighting this thing. When you think about the way she was taken right from Alien to Aliens to this one, I mean, yeah, I'd be ready to abandon all hope too if I was her. But I just have to be honest, the whole alien being inside of her the whole time is just downright stupid. Like what, Tywin Lannister didn't see that thing incubating inside of her when evaluating her in the beginning? And then every time we've seen this thing get placed into someone, the life cycle is usually pretty quick. But this one just happens to last days longer. She also says that it's a queen, like she somehow knows that? How do you know that? I guess you could make the argument that because it's a queen, its life cycle could be different. And who knows? Maybe the creature somehow knew that it had to wait until it got next to a population before emerging. It's not really well explained either way, and it just felt like a way to force this character into having some kind of a conclusion. So in the end, Alien 3 is a bit of a cluster. The production was an absolute nightmare, and you can very much tell while watching it. But Sigourney Weaver is always giving 100%, as is the rest of the cast. And the entire prison planet is an effective setting for the xenomorph to wreak havoc. It's easily the best part of the movie. However, the nihilistic tone does become a tad overbearing, and it's followed up by a third act full of too much schlock and slapstick. So while Alien 3 is far from perfect, it does have a few positive points that keeps it from being an absolute dumpster fire like the movies that followed. Do I think it's great? Not at all. Do I think it's good? I do think that if you're marathoning the Alien films before Romulus, you should definitely give this one a watch. Avoid Resurrection if you can though, unless you have enough alcohol for it. So in the end, I'm gonna give Alien 3 a C.